A wonderful late afternoon to all of you. This is Artslandia Happy Hour, Mondays with the Maestro, and my name is Carlos Kalmar. I am the music director of your Oregon Symphony. You know, many years ago, I attended a concert in Vienna given by a great pianist. He had finished the so-called official part of his routine, and the audience clapped and cheered so much that he decided to play an encore. He selected a piece of slow, late, romantic French music, and after he started, a few seconds into the piece, I noticed that a lady sitting next to me was so overwhelmed by the music that she started to cry. So that got me thinking. Have you actually ever thought of how we humans express our feelings and emotions? Most of the time, whether we are happy, we feel sorrow, or we feel amazement, even surprise, we verbalize our emotions. Or sometimes we just look a certain way, or we laugh, or we cry. And everybody around us understands our feelings that we are expressing in that particular moment. But what can an artist do in such a circumstance? How does a composer express those things when she or he cannot use words? How can feelings be put into music so that everybody understands what they mean? Or can it be true as well that we, the listeners, the public, interpret pieces of music a certain way, although the composer did not have the intention to fuel the feelings the music incites in us? I'm here to talk to you about exactly that, to talk about feelings and how they are being expressed in classical music. Every Monday here on this Artslandia Happy Hour, I will select one feeling, pair music with it, and to talk about how a composer went about when he actually tried to describe an emotion in music. So I would suggest let's get started and let's listen to something absolutely amazing. What you just heard was an excerpt right at the end of the opera Dido and Aeneas by Henry Purcell. Dido's Lament. This was Dido who, after drinking poison, was saying goodbye to the world. It's a simple, prolonged melody, and Purcell achieves to put all of us in a state of despair and grievance. Purcell has just helped us to delve into the emotional theme of this late afternoon's show, grief. So I guess we are all doing the same. We are all in our homes, hopefully safe and healthy. But not only the feeling of anxiety at times of the coronavirus is overwhelming our thoughts, we also have had ample opportunity to mourn the thousands and thousands of people who have died around the world. I guess this is an extreme situation in which our normal ways of interaction as a society are no longer. We can see each other only from the distance. We cannot get close to each other. We look around suspiciously. At the same time, the feeling of sadness and grief is incredibly strong, and many of us are crying for a relative, a friend, somebody we heard about, or simply because we have heard one of too many devastating stories of human loss. To what music do we turn in such times? Is there something that appears traditionally in our emotional spectrum when we grieve? Are there differences between the cultures when it comes to this? Isn't it true that music is a medium that gets you through the day in times like these? So let us go together to the most obvious choice for what I call grievance mourning music here in the United States of America, the Adagio for Strings by Samuel Barber. Now, Barber did not write this music with the intention of providing us solace in times of grief. As a matter of fact, this piece was originally the second movement of a string quartet he wrote. But after he adapted this movement for a string orchestra, Barber's music took a route of its own. This powerful piece can be heard in memorial services, funerals, etc. It is a piece of calm, soothing music, and at first it puts all of us in a peaceful place. Then, of course, it develops into more drama, it gets very intense, and the point is soon reached where it feels as if the listener's own heart, full of sorrow, is not enough to contain what has to be said. The music calms down and ends without resolution, just as if the end of life is just a passage into a different room. Let us just listen to it. How transcendental and wonderful this music is. This was the ending of Barber's Adagio for Strings, and we are in happy hour at Artslandia, Mondays with the Maestro. And my name is Carlos Kalmar. So, I think we have now looked at music that was given a life of its own over the course of the decades. Since we are talking about music that helps us to grieve and to mourn, despite the fact that this music has not been written for that purpose. So, I would suggest that we all turn to something that is even further removed from the idea of a funeral march. Let's go to a piece by Beethoven, and I tell you a true story of my own childhood. So I was born in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay. Were always very interested in music, and I started taking violin lessons when I was 6. As with, I would say, every child, my relationship with music was purely instinctual, and I, of course, enjoyed everything that is loud and fast. Little did I know about music that transports all of us into a darker emotion. But then I remember that something happened that had a deep effect on the world and subsequently also on my own perception of what music can do. So here's the thing. I was at my uncle's house. I was playing around, goofing around, running around with my brother, when all of a sudden the demeanor of the adults changed and they were glued to the radio with intensity. We didn't have a TV. And I did not understand at all what was going on. I was 5 at that time. And then after an announcer said something, there was music. Very somber, solemn, earnest music. I remember those sounds until today. The President of the United States of America, John F. Kennedy, had been assassinated, and there was music. Beethoven. But strangely, it was actually not the only symphonic funeral march that Beethoven wrote, which is from the Third Symphony. This was the second movement of the Seventh Symphony that was being played on the national radio in Uruguay over and over again. It was absolutely mesmerizing. So years went by, and that experience of how I heard the second movement of Beethoven's Seventh was ingrained in my mind for a long time, until, of course, the time came when I started to conduct this piece in concert halls. That is when I actually looked carefully at the music and I discovered something that is quite obvious. The second movement of Beethoven's Seventh is not a funeral march. It was not meant for mourning or grieving purposes at all. Beethoven wrote it just as a quieter movement within a symphony that is full of energy and high speed. The symphony as a whole, the Seventh, has been described by Richard Wagner as an apotheosis to dance, and the second movement became so popular that it was played frequently in concert during the 19th century. So I'm thinking, all in all, it's possible that circumstances, in this case, unfortunately, the Kennedy assassination, give music a different meaning. And it is all absolutely okay and great. Here is a part of Beethoven's Seventh, the second movement. we are examining together the emotion grief here at Artslandia Happy Hour. We are examining this emotion not only from the point of view that due to the pandemic, it may be a very current feeling for many of us, since many have lost friends or simply people they knew. We are looking at the specific possibilities that a composer of classical music for her, him, the sentiment of sadness, grief, and mourning into music. Now, from my knowledge, of course, several funeral marches have been written by composers over the course of the centuries. And of course, it is true that some of these funeral marches have a tremendous impact when you hear them in a concert hall. For example, Beethoven's second movement of his third symphony is absolutely devastating. And yes, the music by Chopin, as written in his second piano sonata, it makes us shiver in its beauty and solemnity. But interestingly enough, when it comes to real funerals, memorials, etc., that we attend, we do not listen to those actual funeral marches. We have different music that provides us solace and comfort. So the question is is Beethoven's funeral march too majestic? Is Chopin's maybe too specific? I don't know. But the reality is that when you even search for music that is frequently played when something tragic happens, there are wonderful pieces of music that actually serve a different purpose than what the composer intended. The next piece I want to talk to you about actually fits the profile only in parts. I'm talking about the very famous Adagietto from Mahler's Symphony No. 5. This is not a funeral march at all. But on the other side, when we are overwhelmed by grief and we look for music that also offers us, all of us, comfort, what better music than a love letter in music? Mahler's famous Adagietto is a love letter to his wife Alma. In the music, we find feelings expressed that can be soulful or with warmth or with deepest emotion. All words that actually apply when we are mourning a loved one. Here is the end of the Adagietto. I love Mahler's music so much, and being an Austrian born in Uruguay, having studied in Vienna, and having spent 38 years of my life in the city of Vienna, means that I have a strong affinity for Mahler, who is in his own way very, very Austrian. About the next piece, let me tell you a story. I once worked at the New England Conservatory for Music in Boston. It was a lot of fun to be with young musicians of such enormous talent. But I remember that the orchestra had also to play a little memorial for a professor who had died just a few days earlier. It was a very solemn memorial. In the speeches were made, and there was this of music full of gravitas, which we all hear quite often at funerals and in memorial services. So, what was it? You know, one of the best friends of the British composer Edward Elgar was August Johannes Jäger, who worked at the Novello Music Edition. Elgar talked to Jäger about his struggle with a new piece of music that Elgar called the Enigma Variations. He could not get anyone interested in the piece, and Elgar started to doubt himself and his capacities as a composer so much that he considered giving up composition as a whole and returned to teaching music. Now, his friend Jäger was so alarmed that he immediately contacted colleagues, including the famous German conductor Hans Richter, who actually looked at the piece once it was finished and liked it and accepted it. Now that was, of course, the start of a new era of success as a composer for Edward Elgar. But what had Jäger told Elgar that got his spirits going in a positive direction? He actually spoke to him about Beethoven and about Beethoven's struggle with deafness. Now, out of that came a variation in the Enigma Variations. It's right in the middle of the piece. It actually describes the talk about Beethoven's deafness between Elgar and Jäger. And the piece, this little movement, is called Nimrod. Nimrod is an old word for the term Jäger, the name of his friend, which in German means hunter. Pun intended. Let us enjoy it together. We are together here at Artslandia, Monday happy hour with the Maestro. My name is Carlos Kalmar, and I am talking to you about the sentiment of grief in classical music. You can imagine that when you are very, very young and an aspiring conductor in your 20s, you dream a lot about the music that you hopefully will be allowed to conduct one day. And then there might be very few pieces of music that are so important to you that you simply beg to perform them during your career. Now, in that sense, I got very lucky. From the time when I was younger, I had a very small list of symphonic pieces that I really want. It's a silly list on the internet, 100 places you should see or you die, or the likes. On my list, there was Mozart's Requiem, of course. I've conducted it many times. It fits the theme of grieving perfectly. Here is the amazing Lacrimosa. This is real grief. You are at Monday happy hour with the Maestro at Artslandia, and my name is Carlos Kalmar. I always think what a sublime music Mozart actually was capable of writing. You know, I noticed that I have been talking to you quite a lot about music that has been utilized by us, the listeners, as a vehicle of mourning, intersected with music that actually was written with the purpose of grieving. But there is also music out there that has a very tragic element is related of loss, but we do not think about it when it comes in. We just enjoy that music in concert halls or sometimes in the media when we listen, because it transports us to another dimension. And here is the time when we should all turn our attention to Tchaikovsky. Now, Tchaikovsky had a very complicated life. He had to overcome many struggles. He tried unsuccessfully to kill himself once. He dealt with being very shy, and he had depression. And he also had to deal with emotional fevers, which only increased as he got older. He became misanthropic with time, despite the fact that he was famous. But undoubtedly, his biggest struggle of all in his life was his homosexuality. He had a relationship with his nephew, but he was overwhelmed with fear about his relationship becoming public, which would have led to public disgrace. All of that culminated when, at a dinner barely a week after the Symphony No. 6 by Tchaikovsky was premiered, he was at a party with his friends. He ordered a glass of water, and it was given to him with the warning that it had not been previously boiled. He gulped it down, maybe intentionally, and a week later he died from cholera. The last movement of the Symphony No. 6, which has the surname Pathétique, is a powerful testament to the idea of struggle and desperation that ends in silence because the hero succumbs to the battle of life. How incredibly sad this music is. Take a listen. I have one more piece of music I want to share with all of you in this afternoon happy hour at Artslandia. Because this music puts a different spin on the idea of loss of life and therefore on the idea of grief. This is Brahms, and it's part of the last movement of his German Requiem. Let me just for all of you about the time we are living in. There is a virus out there so powerful that life on Earth as we know it has been put on a pause. Our economies are in shambles. We are being asked to stay in our homes. When we go out, many of us are masked. You rarely see full faces. The uncertainty about the future is overwhelming. When will this end? Can we return to normal life? Will our jobs still be available to us? Can we still feed our families? I do not have an answer to any of those questions, but I firmly believe that in times like these, at the end of the tunnel, we will have to be together as a society. We will need to set certain beliefs aside in order to survive. In the meantime, we can only deal with grief, which is the theme of tonight's talk, and we can only try to deal with anxiety. In times like these, we may be visiting each stage of grief, disbelief, anger, sadness. But at the end, there has to be something like acceptance. Acceptance of what this pandemic is doing to all of us, paired with the certainty that there will be light at the end of the tunnel. And that is what Brahms' German Requiem is all about. The first movement of the piece opens with the words, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they will receive consolation." That is the spirit of the entire piece. Over 7 movements, Brahms puts in front of us music that helps us through struggle and despair. And at the end, as if to complete the arch of life, there is the understanding that everything ends, not in sadness, but with a tearful smile. Thank you for joining me tonight for Mondays with the Maestro. My name is Carlos Kalmar and I'm the music director of your Oregon Symphony. It was really fun to learn all this new technology, and I look forward to next week where we will explore another theme of emotions expressed through music. I'm thinking about the theme of love. If you have a question, for example, for me, please send it to info@artslandia.com. I look very much forward to hearing from you. And please make sure to tune in every weekday at 5 p.m. for Artslandia Happy Hour. For example, tomorrow night it is an evening with artist Austin Eddy, who will be giving us a real great painting lesson. And remember, the Oregon Symphony is there for you. We are in our community, so anytime look for our webpage orsymphony.org. Until next week.